Want to remind everyone to download, rate, and subscribe to the 415ers podcast. As always, coming to you on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network. We're on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at the 415ers. I'm on social at eGettings10. Marc is on social at Marc Grandy, Marc with a C, Grandy with an I. And speaking of a lot of bodies that the Niners are getting back, well, they also have a lot of bodies right now on offense that I think we saw a challenge posed against Los Angeles, being if this is a team that is going to play physically, and if this is a team that's going to try and wear down opponents and maybe not blow out the opposition, but try and win those tight, hard-fought games, there's going to be a lot of guys at skill positions that are going to be left unfed, so to speak, with a lot of mouths to feed there. Deebo Samuel, of course, was, I think, Exhibit A against Los Angeles. Who knows what he was dealing with coming back from injury, whether or not that was the reason he didn't get the ball that much. I believe he had 4 rushes on the ground, 2 catches on 6 targets. But as the number one receiver on this team, entering the year, he kind of got phased out a bit. We tossed this around a little bit when McCaffrey came in, and then last week, of course, coming off of the bye week. But, do the 49ers just have too many mouths to feed on offense for fans to feel satisfied on a week in and week out basis?
I think it probably depends on, kind of a game by game basis, what happened in a specific one. I think, this Chargers game, it was ultimately a win, but as we kind of talked about earlier with the red zone inefficiency, it was still kind of a frustrating win because you knew that, it could have easily been a double digit win. This is a Niners team that probably played better than a 6-point margin. I mean, it came down to the fourth quarter. Niners did not take the lead until relatively late in that game. So I think there's a bit of frustration there. And then as a result, you kind of look down the box score and say, wow, well, Deebo Samuel only 2 catches, George Kittle only 1 catch. Like, that's an issue that has to be better. But I think it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. And I think specifically for Deebo Samuel, it kind of presents something similar. And I know these players aren't on the same level, and what Deebo Samuel has accomplished specifically last year is of a higher level and more impressive. But I kind of relate this to what's happening with Jordan Poole on the basketball court for the Warriors right now. It's kind of, this offseason was an opportunity for the rest of the league to kind of grind the tape on this new guy. Jordan Poole had a fantastic season last year, was a really big part of the Warriors winning a championship. In this similar way, Deebo Samuel kind of took the NFL by storm last year, was this kind of new hybrid weapon. He called it a wide back, a running back and a running back and a wide receiver. Obviously, again, I think what Deebo did last year more impressive than what Jordan Poole did last year. But again, it allowed offense or defenses, opposing teams, to kind of key in on that guy, those 2 guys specifically, and try to, scheme up new ways to take them away, to limit them. And we're seeing, I think, in real time, live, both these guys, Deebo Samuel and Jordan Poole, try to react and evolve their game so that they can be effective once again against these defenses. It's something that Steve Kerr has said multiple times about Jordan Poole. Well, now he's being defended differently. Opposing teams are putting their best defenders on him. Now he has to adjust. With Deebo Samuel, he hasn't been as effective in the run game. So it's up to him. It's up to the rest of the team, to Kyle Shanahan, to help scheme him up in better ways, in different ways, to kind of adjust to the adjustment. So I think in that regard, Deebo Samuel hasn't been the most effective with the ball in his hands right now. Someone like Brandon Ayuk has been better, probably because the defense is so focused on trying to take Deebo Samuel away. I think there's a bit of that in this, and maybe it takes the Niners a little bit longer than ideally they would hope to adjust to these adjustments. But I think once they do and they're able to find a way to scheme him open a little bit more, we're going to see his touches increase. But right now, considering the fact that he hasn't been too terribly effective, on his touches, what would you prefer? Force feeding something that isn't working quite well, or, giving the ball to what the defense is allowing you to do and having that be the reason you move the ball?
I would prefer that he gets open.
That's the ideal one, yeah. But I mean, you have to credit defenses at a certain point as well. I mean, they're certainly doing a good job to limit him.
That's true, but I also saw the Chargers line up Asante Samuel Jr., who is their de facto number one corner because of J.C. Jackson's broken kneecap, on Brandon Ayuk, who had 7 catches for 80-something yards. The Chargers also played a lot of zone. They disguise things a little bit differently than most teams just because they are so banged up. So maybe it's not a fair example. But I also think Deebo Samuel was a first-team All-Pro receiver last year. Like, I
Yeah.
know he was a wide back and that kind of changed the trajectory of the Niners season after week 9. But he had 1,400 receiving yards. Like Deebo Samuel was a damn good wide receiver last year, in addition, of course, to being a running back. Like that's the most perplexing thing to me about it, because with Christian McCaffrey coming in, sure, that takes some of Deebo's rushes away, but I also thought that was something that he didn't necessarily want to do as much while he was negotiating his contract over the course of the summer, that he was worried about getting banged up the way injuries had sort of followed him early in his career. I know he's willing to do whatever it takes to win the game, but I do also see him being sort of the odd man out at this point, which is weird considering he is your number one and he is paid to be your number one. He is paid like a number one receiver. So I'm not saying that Deebo Samuel has to have 15 targets against the Cardinals on Monday night. He's got to catch 10 balls for 120 yards. But I do look at, okay, on third down, who is Jimmy Garoppolo looking at? He's looking more at Brandon Ayuk, and even against the Chargers, Jawan Jennings,
Yeah.
more than Deebo Samuel. I don't know if maybe that's just a good problem to have, that he can be at this point, maybe your number one wide receiver on one day. He can be Deebo the decoy on another day. But I just wonder why he's the guy that gets left out of this offensive equation when he was the guy who last year carried the offense to a conference championship.
I do think one thing, I mean, Deebo Samuel, there was all that noise that you're kind of referencing, that he doesn't want to have to, carry as much of a burden, specifically running the ball. He's worried about overuse and injuries and how that might, shorten his career and thereby maybe, lessen the amount of money that he may be able to make over his career as a football player. When he first spoke to the media after signing that new contract extension, he was asked about that, and he was like, "No, I have no issues with the wide back role. Like, I love it. I love doing that sort of thing. I just, I was advised, not to speak on anything really while the whole negotiation process was happening." So I think he's totally fine with getting his touches.
Well, he's fine now that he's compensated for getting those touches.
Yes, yes, but
Like, but if he was making $15 million a year instead of 22 or 24, I don't think he would be as satisfied, because he's putting his body in more harm's way.
probably. I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. I do also think that there's a part of, I don't know. I think we maybe all just kind of oversimplified. You see all this talent. You have Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk, and you have the bye week. It kind of coincides at a perfect time. You get more healthy. You have all these weapons, and it's probably not nearly as easy and a lot more complex than we make it seem, in terms of how an offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan kind of learns to use all these weapons. I think you probably would have liked to see, again, more efficiency in the red zone, but this is still an offense that moved the ball a lot against the Chargers. I mean, just look at the yards in this game. I mean, 387 yards. That's nothing to scoff at. It was a good day offensively for the 49ers, but it's probably more complex than, just a simple, all right, it was a bye week. You have lots of time to get ready for it, Kyle. You have all these offensive weapons. Like, it's going to take some a bit of an adjustment period. You're going to see what works better than other things, what fails, how you can improve off of a certain schematic thing that you saw against the Chargers, how you now deploy that against the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's a lot more complex than just saying, all right, we have this talent, we're off a bye, we have all this new stuff implemented into our playbook. let's go out and it's going to click immediately. It probably is going to take a little bit more time and some adjusting here and there after a week, after you saw something fail, after you saw it do well, how you can add on to it. I'm sure that is what's happening, with Kyle Shanahan and the rest of the offensive staff right now. How do you make something more effective, even though it was already relatively effective the first time out? I think we will see kind of, the offense build off of each week's performance from here on out, because everything that Kyle Shanahan is trying to do right now with all these weapons is new. Maybe he's dreamed of these scenarios in the past, but he's never really been able to do it in practice, in reality, in a game. So I think we'll see maybe some of these issues dissipate a little bit as you get more and more experience with all these weapons.
Sure, but let me ask you this. Run, receiving, whatever. Who's the best playmaker on the Niners right now?
Christian McCaffrey.
I agree. Who's the second best playmaker on the Niners right now?
Deebo Samuel.
Okay, he was fifth in touch. Like Elijah Mitchell got 18 carries. That's understandable. That's the identity of this team, to run the football, to wear people down, to lean on you, so that in the fourth quarter you have nothing left like the Chargers did. And even though they were within a score, it didn't feel like they were. I'm looking at Brandon Ayuk, who's getting the ball more through the air. I'm looking at Juwan Jennings, who seems to be more trusted on third down.
I mean, Deebo did have six touches. I know 4 of them were on the ground, but 6 touches, I mean, that's tied
I think one was
third.
an overthrow. There was one that Jimmy probably should have hit Deebo on, across over the middle. But, like, I want the football to be in the hands of the guys that can do the most damage. And to me, Deebo is too creative and explosive, improvisational of a player to not get the football. Like, I understand that they won the game and this is a process-based team, but there are going to be points in the season, regular or post, in which you're going to have to toss out the game plan, in which you're going to have to play a little backyard football. And to me, Deebo is your second best guy at doing that. And he's the guy that you can rely on the road in a playoff game. He's the guy who you can rely on to dig you out of a hole. You can get him the ball and he could take it 50 yards to the house from behind the line of scrimmage. He can also, beat you down the field. I just want to see more creativity from Kyle Shanahan and the play calling from the 49ers that can extract what we saw last year. Maybe not, the 1,600 total yards or 13 touchdowns from Samuel that we got, but somewhere in the middle, because right now, Marc, it just ain't it.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I'm right there with you. I would love to see, more explosive Deebo Samuel, but I will also rewind to a year ago and let's try to think, go back in our minds and think what the conversation was around Deebo Samuel towards the end of the regular season last year when he was just willing the Niners to victory. He would seem to have an incredible rushing touchdown every single week, and everyone in the football community just could not believe that what was happening. And then, he did it in the playoffs against the Cowboys, against not as much against the Packers, because that was just kind of a slog of a game and not much offense, but certainly did it as well against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. The conversation was, oh my God, you are going to drive Deebo Samuel into the ground. Stop giving him all those touches. And the reality was last year, what else were they going to do? They did not have, all these offensive weapons. They were injured, running the ball. I mean, Elijah Mitchell was hurt. That's why Deebo Samuel really was featured as a wide back, towards the end of the regular season. And they stuck with it because it was working so well into the playoffs. But that was the conversation. And it got to a point in the offseason where it was, oh my God, you used him so much that he wants out. I mean, I know that there's a medium here where it's not to that point where you're worried about overuse and injuring a guy. And, above, he only gets, 2 catches in a game. Like there's a medium there, but there is certainly a level to the fact where you also don't want to overuse one of your best star weapons in week 10 of the regular season because you're worried about what the future might hold if you do use him too much. There's something here about playing your cards too early. And I'm not saying that it excuses the fact that he only had 2 catches. I mean, he did have 6 targets, and some of them were Deebo's fault, some of them were Jimmy's fault, sure. But I think there's also a bit of the fact that Kyle Shanahan knows now, with the offense that he has and the weapons that he has beyond Deebo Samuel, he does not need to rely on him as much as he did last year. And we'll probably see more of Deebo Samuel when the games mean more, because that's just simply the type of player that he is.
To that, I would say Christian McCaffrey had 28 touches last week. I know that Deebo wasn't in. I know Juwan Jennings wasn't in. But Kittle was there. Ayuk was there. You had other running backs that could alleviate some of that pressure you're talking about on a guy who also has had injury history, maybe not actually more so even than Deebo, but they didn't do that. And in fact, it was a game that was less in question than the Chargers game. So it's just something I'm keeping an eye on, Mark. And I'm more curious than aggravated that Deebo Samuel seems to be the odd man out at this point, even though he's paid to be your go-to guy. So it's just something I'm tracking moving forward.
So am I. I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I said all that, but I do agree that I think that what's best for the 49er offense is more touches for Deebo Samuel, because he's just that explosive and incredible of a football player. And, for me, it doesn't really matter how many of those touches are runs versus catches. I think probably we'll see, him maybe go back to a little bit more of a receiver, just because Elijah Mitchell is back and Christian McCaffrey's a great running back as well. But I mean, I'm with you. I think that if the Niners want to reach their offensive potential, that means more from Deebo Samuel, because he's just such a unique weapon.
If they want to be explosive and physical, they might need to get more Deebo in. That'll wrap it up for this episode of the 415ers. We appreciate you tuning in 3 times a week, as always. Evan Giddings with Marc Grandy. We'll be coming at you on Friday for a preview of the upcoming Monday Night Football game against the Arizona Cardinals. Should hopefully have some updates for you from Colorado Springs, where the Niners are practicing. Kyle Shanahan's going to talk to the media. I imagine we'll hear from some of those offensive weapons that we've tossed around in today's episode. So we'll have some updates for you on that. But in the meantime, go download, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. And we will talk to you on Friday. Appreciate everyone. Take it easy.